So yes, we're going to talk about purgatory, and just like to preface this, a lot of like the confusion between Protestants and Catholics is that Protestants essentially believe that once you profess that Christ is Lord and that he died for you, he rose from the dead, everything like that, that you are saved, and then you are always saved. But with Catholics, we believe that being saved is like a constant. It's like once saved, am being saved, and then will be saved at the end of time and everything like that. And so because we're like constantly going through a choice of whether we want to love God or not, we believe that we can have like some highs in our faith and some lows, but like what happens if we die when we're at one of those lows? That's where purgatory comes in.
So purgatory. So why purgatory? So the actual word purge, purifying, is the cleansing state for those who have repented and have died in God's grace but still have some attachment to sin. So we as Catholics believe that purgatory is a place of cleansing. That it's not, you're not going to purgatory and then you're stuck there. But it's a stepping stone towards heaven. In the Catechism 1031, it's a gift of mercy from God. We believe that that is a place that you can be cleansed even further, because heaven, there will be no sin. In Revelations 21:27, nothing unclean can enter heaven. So we firmly believe that, like nothing unclean can enter heaven. So purgatory is where we are cleansed of like all our imperfections. So if we do die with like some impurities, if we don't go to confession like right before death, then we are not perfect, and only perfect things are in heaven. So there's this period of expectant joy where you're like, okay, like I'm in purgatory, like okay, like I'm not damned, which is really good. But like purgatory is like on your way to heaven. So a period of expectant joy is like, okay, like eventually like one day like I will see my Father. So it's like a hard period of like cleansing, but in the end, like okay, like eventually like one day, like it's it may be long, but we will be cleansed. So if like there's still like sin clings to Christian, but there's no sin in heaven, how does that like make any sense?
So that's where the Catholic Church finds scriptural backing for purgatory in verse 11 through 15 of 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And I'm going to read through this pretty quickly, but the bold part is the important part, so that's when you can like snap in, lock in. Okay, ready? So, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. Beautiful. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. Okay, and just to like clarify how this kind of shows the existence of purgatory, we're going to break this one down again. So the first part is pretty important. The foundation is Jesus always. Like, no matter if you're Catholic or Protestant, always Jesus. And so as we live our lives, we are called to like attest to the love that we have for him and everything. But as we were talking about with sin, like everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has those days. You saw that one coming. Okay. And so, if we die with that impurity, like we're not without hope. We're not like, all hope is not lost. So here's what I was thinking about this. Imagine that your soul is like a piece of gold, and truly like it's worth way more than that. So we're just gonna use that. When you take gold like out of like it's out of the earth, basically, it's not perfect, especially we would be. Like when we come out of this world, we are so tainted and like pushed around by sin and everything that we're a little bit mauled. And so purgatory, the analogy of that would be like that gold being put through fire and then being purified but not destroyed. You know, the gold remains, and that goes with this part of the verse right here. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. So if we show that we have built our foundation on Jesus and really truly lived for him, then that reward will be heaven. But as we were talking about, there just has to be a little bit of a purifying process before we can enter heaven. Like if you think of like a ring, you wouldn't want to give someone a ring with like all this crusty dirt and stuff like that. You'd like, the reward is like the beautiful ring coming out on the other side of the fire and then gifting it to someone. And then I love this part. It says, if this person's work is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. So we were talking earlier about how when we die, if we still have attachment to sin, that's why we would go to purgatory. And so that's kind of like the loss that this verse would be talking about. You know, like when we're on earth, we may be super enticed by like money or by things or even by people. Like we can get distracted by God, like by people from God. And so in purgatory, if we're still in like a state of grace, which we'll talk about that in a second, then we will have to reorder our attachments and like put God first. And that's going to be a little bit of a painful process because we've adjusted so hard to what we were like living in on earth. We'll suffer that loss, we'll feel that like pain and that ache, but yet we'll be saved in the end. We're going to come out on the other side, and that's the expectant joy that Jess was just talking about a minute ago. And okay, mortal and venial sins. Yes. In terms of attachment to sins, so let's start with venial sins. It's a little bit less heavy, literally. Yeah, those little attachments that we have to the world are the sins that aren't going to completely separate us from God and aren't going to completely like deter us from being able to love him and to be able to like show charity to other people. Whereas mortal sins, as Jess was talking about in the little confession segment, those are like big, grave matters that like our relationship with God is broken, like and needs reconciliation, you know. And so if we die, Catholics believe that if we die with venial sin, we can go to purgatory and be purified, be cleansed. But with mortal sins, if we don't get those like reconciled, like truly before we die, then we have to suffer the consequences of hell for it, and like that's just unfortunate. But truly, because we were talking about how sin is like a conscious decision, if we choose to defy God in like super huge ways, then in reality, like we're choosing our destination. Like in this life right now, we're choosing whether we are going to reject God and choose hell essentially, or whether we're going to try and choose God and try and get to heaven. But like we talked about how purgatory is a gift of mercy from God. God wouldn't just let it be like either the absolutely perfect people get in or like if you have like one little thing on your heart, like bye Felicia, like that's not it, you know. God is so merciful, and so he wants every person that has the ability to love to be able to get to heaven, even if it takes a little bit of like that little purgatory pain. And just to like clear that up with like an analogy really quick, just between mortal and venial sins. Like think about like a romantic relationship. So you love this person, right? And you choose to love that person like in every moment, you know? But if you don't continue to choose that person and choose to love them like in every moment, your relationship is going to fail, you know? That's what we believe about like the fluctuation between like whether we choose God or we don't, and we're gonna talk about that in like a second with salvation and whether Catholics believe that we can lose it or not, which we do. Spoiler alert, sorry Brandon. And don't worry, that's not all he had to say. But yeah. So in choosing to love that person, like there are gonna be little like, you know, like if they leave their dishes in the sink or like they leave their dirty underwear on the floor, you're like, you know. But that's not gonna completely hurt your relationship with them. You know, you're still gonna be able to love them after that. But if you choose to like commit adultery or to betray like your spouse or something like that, then it's really hard to come back from that without like some sort of reconciliation. And so that's kind of like the distinction between mortal and venial sins. It's like the mortal sins are what cuts us off from God's love, and the venial sins are just what like hurt it a little bit. But that is not to say that there is any sin, except for one, but that's a whole different conversation, that any sin cannot be forgiven. Like they all can be forgiven. And just like if we don't get that opportunity to get those venial sins righted, then purgatory would be the place for us. But I learned this analogy. This is just so that you guys, calling you higher, okay? Like if think about archery, okay? You want to aim high, or else you're gonna. So you don't want to aim for purgatory. You want to aim for perfection. You want to aim for heaven. And then if you accidentally like misjudge and fall short a little bit, you got purgatory. But you don't want to aim for purgatory and then fall short. That's not good. Okay, so yeah, just calling you higher, guys. Okay, yeah, so that's purgatory, and we're gonna move on to salvation.